Hello, my friends. Here we are once again, another week of Spiritism, a closer look. You are on Kardec Radio right now with us. We do the program every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And here down on your screen, you have the ways you can get in touch with us, contact us via email or kardecradio.com or our Facebook page. So just feel free to get in touch with us, make suggestions, comments, even to request a topic for us to discuss here on our program. Tonight, we're going to take a closer look at Purgatory. Yeah, Purgatory, of course, under the Spiritist light. This is presented to us in the codification right here on this book, Heaven and Hell, by Allan Kardec. So there's an entire chapter about it, chapter 5. So we are going to look at overall what is said about what he compiled about the subject, Purgatory, and we're going to blend with a little bit of history and explain the Spiritist view on this, because this is not very easy to explain for people that belong or who come from a different belief system. So, all right, here we go. Well, to begin with, Jesus himself never said anything about purgatory. There is no such a word in the Gospels. There is not even an idea on purgatory or anything in those senses. We're going to explain a little bit better what it means in the classic sense, but this is something that does not come out of Jesus' mouth per se. In 312 after Christ, Constantine I rises up to power. So he takes power. He becomes the emperor of the Roman Empire, which by then it's already huge. So he comes to power, and he comes under circumstances that are, to say the least, strange, related by himself. For a bunch of reasons, we're not going to get into the history too much because that's not the purpose, but the empire at this point was divided into the Western and the Eastern Empire. He was the emperor for the eastern part of the empire, and he wants the empire all for himself, so he declares war against the Western part of the empire, and he wins the war. In simple terms, he just wins the war, and he attributes that to the Christians who gave him the idea of painting crosses on their shields. So when he comes out, when the victory is achieved, he says, well, that's because of those crosses and these Christians. And he asks himself, who are these Christians exactly? They didn't even know. So because they were pagans, at the time of Constantine, persecution was already very intense because the emperor before him, Diocletian, he was one of the worst in terms of going after Christians, killing Christians, and preventing them from getting together and all of that. So Constantine says, I need to know what these people are. I know nothing about them. And this is year 312. And time goes by, and all of these pagans, not only him, but everybody that were all those with him in power. So little by little, they try to learn a little bit what this is and what is not. So they decided that the best way to get this thing done at a certain point was in 325. So you see, that's 13 years later. In 325, they invited the bishops and the high people, the people in high classes in the congregations, to form what he called the First Council of Nicaea. Nicaea is the place where it took place. So the First Council of Nicaea. This Council of Nicaea comes out with a creed. It's called Creed of Nicaea. That creed tells Christians to be, right, what they had to do, what they could not do, meaning a user's manual, literally a user's manual. So in this council, a lot of things were left behind because they couldn't get to an agreement. So they said, well, let's get going with this. We will do other of these meetings, right? These councils, and we will define the other things later. So that's 325 establishes the base for what it came to be the Catholic Church, or the church in general at that time. So from 325, the church becomes really, really powerful, because now Christians were no longer persecuted. They could just go out on the streets, read their scripture, their manuscripts, and so. And then time goes by, but there were questions that the population in general, or Christians in general, they had no one to ask but the priests and those in power within the church. So they had questions like, explain better about heaven, about hell. How can it be if, let's say, for example, a child, it is born and it dies, let's say a few months after his birth, her birth. How can you explain that this person is going to hell or to heaven based on what? He don't have time to show anything per se, right? You don't have time for anything, let alone those who couldn't even be born alive. So that kind of was in the air for quite some time, and this starts in 325 until 593. That's 350 years plus later, when the Pope at the time, Pope Gregory I, decided that he was going to come up with some idea to stop those numerous questions every day. So he creates what got to be known as the Purgatory. So Purgatory, to begin with, for our understanding, is a man-created concept. It's man-made. It's not divine. It doesn't come from Jesus, nothing like this. It's man-created. It's very dogmatic, because you can, of course, a dogma, you cannot argue about it. You cannot ask or anything. But this one specifically didn't give any explanation to anything at all. How does it work? What is it exactly? The people were not told anything like this, except for the fact that when people die, some of them are going to go straight to heaven. Very few, by the way. Some others go straight to hell. But are those who, we need to analyze this situation a little better. So they're going to be on a staging mode. They're going to be on like a waiting room, if you will. And that waiting room, we're going to call the Purgatory. And that's it. That's all the population is being told. No details, nothing else. And this is 593. That's about 600. In the year 1274, more than 600 years after that, that's the first time that the church goes back to the theme, the subject, and touches on, let's explain, let's teach what purgatory is. So they get together, they do one of these meetings. It's called the Second Council of Lyon in France, in 1274. So they define a bunch of other things, including, at least that was the goal of the council, including defining the teachings about purgatory. And they don't teach anything at all. The only thing they do is they state that purgatory is not a physical place and there is no burning fire. I'm sorry, not that it isn't. They don't mention. That's what the population wanted to be. Is it a place? Is there burning fire? So they say absolutely nothing about this, and that was exactly what they should have addressed. The only mention they do about purgatory is that prayers help people in purgatory, and that's it. Nothing else. Prayers help. So now becomes interesting because, first of all, if this is a man-made idea, a man-made concept, it is completely debatable. you can come with a concept and I can, well, let's talk about this thing. I do not agree, or I agree, or I want a better explanation on this or on that, because it's a man-made concept. So it created a lot of confusion, and it became a point of argument for within the church. So groups started to have different ideas about it. So not all denominations of Christianity inherit the idea at the time, and they drift apart. Several groups drift apart. That's in 593, right? Okay, time goes by. And so for some people, it is a place. For some other people, it's just a state. It's just a condition. For some other people, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't apply. And time goes by until the church has to face it. That's in 1274. And they explain that hell is this, I would say, less intense, or not hell, purgatory is a less intense version of hell, but it's still hell because you're still suffering. The person in the waiting room, as they defined or decided, it's still suffering. So suffering is still part of it. So let's look at this from this point of view. If there is no progress in the soul, that was the belief at the time. You go to hell, you go to heaven, and now you have a third marketing option, which is the purgatory. So if there is no progress, moral progress on the soul, or intellectual progress, for that matter, of the soul, how can the soul free itself from this purgatory? And the answer from the church is this only way. It depends on prayers. Prayer is the only thing that you can do. But they say the person cannot pray for itself, for himself, herself. The only way to get freed is prayers which are set for them by those living, or prayers that are paid for to be said by those people on their behalf. So now it's a great opportunity, great marketing opportunity to sell prayer and salvation. And that's how the thing starts. So there's a tremendous abuse by the church, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And the church was selling these things right at their doors. You would go in and say, oh, my family member, my relative died. This is his name. I want to buy a prayer for him, for her. So you would, pay for it. But that's an individual. That would be, for example, me trying to do this for a relative or somebody that I loved and it's gone now. Now, you had those who really had the money. Really, those were vast extensions of land owners and kings and people in power. So these people, they went to the church. Kings went to the church and said, listen, I know you're selling these salvations. You're selling prayers for those in purgatory. I have several loved ones that are gone. They're no longer here. And I want to put a prayer for them. I want to buy prayer in quantity, like a wholesale. Because I have too many family members and relatives, or even people that I simply like, friends or whatever. But it's a large number of people. So I want to buy a lot of prayers. Well, that's going to cost, right? So how does the church accept the payment? From these people? They do not want physical money or cash per se. They wanted land as a form of payment. So what happens is the church had land or pieces of land all over the place in Europe. That's why in Europe, every single city has a bunch of churches. They don't pay anything for it. They got this as as a form of payment for selling prayers for those in purgatory. So purgatory became a very profitable gold mine. As time goes by, some people understand and said, this is not right. This is not written anywhere in the Gospels. And they were led by Martin Luther, and that's how they protested about what the church was doing. That's how in 1510 Protestantism starts. So the classic concept of purgatory does not really apply for us Spiritists, because this is for the classic concept, it's a fork on the road. You stop here, stop. Now we're going to see what happens to you. You're going to go hell or heaven. There is no fork on the road for us. Life simply continues. When you die, it simply continues. There's no stop, put my hands up, stop, let's see. No, there is no such a thing. So the concept doesn't really make sense at all for us as defined by the church originally. You see, the classic purgatory idea of it brings this idea of a temporary condition, but with some very remote possibility for a better outcome. Very likely, after whatever time is needed, you're still going to go to hell. That's what the classic concept leads to believe. It wasn't clear ever, but that's what they lead to believe. Now let's look at our point of view, a Spiritist point of view. Our spirits, or spirits living here, right? They need to remodel their way of life. They need to, we all, right? We need to morally grow, intellectually grow. In order for this to happen, there's got to be a place that we come in and make it happen. And that place is temporary, because we are in the spirit world. We're going to come down here temporarily for a little bit of time to work on those things and come back. Then we come in again, and so and so. So our life here is a temporary thing where we have trials and expiations. Trials and expiations. That's what the earth is for. It is housing spirits that have to undergo trials and expiations. So these spirits are in a temporary condition of suffering, but they are given the opportunity for a new direction here. Establish for themselves a new moral condition and go from there. We have the opportunity for correction and freedom from the struggles and all of that. So our spirits have the opportunity here to purge. That's the word, to purge our impurities. So from the Spiritist point of view, purgatory is here, is right here, right now. You and I, we are in purgatory. Purgatory is our reality. There are some differences, of course, obviously, between the classic concept and ours. For example, in the classic concept, the soul in the purgatory cannot pray for himself, herself. For us, it's exactly the other way around. What we have to do is pray. And we can do ourselves. Of course, we can have help from other people. But we are able to do this for ourselves. And that's how it all starts. The classic concept of purgatory still shows this local, it's based on hell, right? So it still shows this localized hell with all the furnaces and never-ending torture. We don't have anything like this. Suffering is only if I want to. Free will that I am given and you are given allows us to get out of it. We do not depend on other people, other spirits. We do not depend on anything else. We have to do this for ourselves. So the purgatory per se, in the Spiritist concept, it's found in worlds of expiations. This is just one of them. So there's a very interesting phrase here on the heaven and hell. Once Allan Kardec explains more or less what I'm explaining here, he puts this very nice phrase. He says this: purgatory is not some vague and uncertain notion. It is a physical reality, not a physical place. It's a physical reality that we can see, touch, and endure. It's our reality here, right now. Us, incarnates and discarnates. Which wouldn't make sense to say that for the classic version of purgatory. It's only for discarnates. No. Purgatory is this opportunity that we are having. It's this place of trials and expiations that we have to recover from our wrongdoings. And this is personal, not transferable. We cannot outsource this thing. It's based on personal effort and, of course, free will. But if I don't want to do it, nothing is going to happen. But if I want to do it, I can. I do not depend on somebody else buying salvation for me, buying prayers for me. That's not how it works. So it depends on the spirit to take advantage of the opportunity that we are all given. Which opportunity? Being here in the purgatory to learn how to do better choices, to have different outcomes from now on our choices. So we are here, we have our struggles. That's why Allan Kardec says it's still some form of hell, still. Because we have all the struggle that we have to deal with every day with different people we like, people we don't like, all of that. Some spirits take their purgatory, their lesser version of a hell, and they take it into the errant state. When they discarnate, they take that with them and still don't understand why. So they keep suffering here as incarnated and afterlife. So incarnation or reincarnation becomes this method for reparation, I would say, of the wrongdoings, things that we did several lives ago. They need to be offset. That's the opportunity that we are having. And Spiritism, by defining a new concept of purgatory, you see, purgatory is attached to somehow, it's related somehow, indirectly, but it is, to heaven, to hell, to suffering, to punishment. All of it have to do with the classic version of purgatory. So if Spiritism redefines purgatory, with it, along with it, it has to redefine heaven, hell, suffering, punishment, pain, all of that, even God. And isn't that what Spiritism does? You see, it makes all sense. And all of these concepts, these new versions of these words, because now they become words more than a classic concept, heaven, hell, suffering, pain, this is all here. This is all here in this book, Heaven and Hell. This book is so interesting that Allan Kardec collected, and they wrote down, of course, they have all these transcripts of all the mediumistic meetings he was going to, and discarnate suffering spirits were showing up to tell their version of the story. Not only suffering spirits, several, but especially suffering spirits, and they would come up with their stories explaining what they did when they were living on earth, on the crust, and what they were facing now, the consequences they were facing. And all these transcripts, these dialogues, all of it, they are here. They are here on the second part of the book. The first part of the book explains all of this that we're saying. There's one chapter for heaven, one for hell, one for purgatory, and it goes on and on. But these examples of these discarnate spirits that are undergoing a lot of suffering now, it's because they couldn't realize what was going on. That they were already living when incarnated. They were already living in purgatory, and that was their chance of making things different. Purgatory is our present reality. Allan Kardec says that. And I think that's exactly what it is. How do we get out of it? Free will, right? I start prayer, of course, helps. We can help somebody else by praying for them. People can pray for us, of course. Prayer helps, but not for a profit. Not for a profit. But from the very heart, yeah, that helps. Right? So think about it. Take the book, Heaven and Hell, chapter 5. It's very interesting. We added a little bit of history in the beginning so we would, put things into context a little bit more. But yeah, go ahead and read that. I want to thank Arminio for participating with us tonight. Thanks so much, Arminio. And we will be back here Wednesday, 7 p.m. Kardec Radio, Spiritism, A Closer Look. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Thanks so much. Be well. I'll see you next time.